Hello, good morning. Kaya, Wanju, hello and welcome. My name is Carmel van Ruth. I'm a Principal Associate in the Government Architect of WA, and we are embedded within the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. I am delighted to welcome you here today. Thank you for joining this session. We'll start with our acknowledgement. I was born on Wongatha country in the goldfields, but I feel very blessed to be now here in Boorloo, our beautiful city of Perth. And I'd like to acknowledge and express my deep respect for the traditional owners of the land here, the Noongar people of the Whadjuk Noongar Nation. Apologies, stumbled there. You can see my notes, I've been editing furiously. And I'd like to acknowledge my respect for their caring for country, their connections to home and place, which I think is an important part of what we've all been talking about this week. I'd also like to acknowledge the people who have lived experience of housing vulnerability who are attending the conference. I think that the inputs from all of those people across these days really helps to inform what we all know and understand about housing supply and can help inform everybody's work. I'd like to also acknowledge our sponsor for this session, Mission Australia. Thank you. So, I got excited last night when I was at dinner and one of my colleagues from Treasury got up from the table to leave and said to their friend, "I'll see you tomorrow at the MMC session." And that's when I realised that this will be one that is an attractive topic, so no pressure, guys. So our session today is called Time to Deliver, Modern Methods of Construction. This session will explore the transformative impacts of modern methods of construction and how it is revolutionising the construction industry by enhancing efficiency, adaptability, which of course has great sustainability benefits. So we have 4 speakers here today, a wonderful blend of people within government, people that are helping to deliver policy or housing programs, people that are delivering them and rolling them out, through to private developers who are, they've got skin in the game. They're actually the people that are facing the daily hurdles and challenges in actually delivering this type of housing. So we have Jess Berry, who is the Managing Director and co-owner of PIQUE and Fox Modular, based here in WA. We have Damien Crough, who is the Founding Director and Executive Chair of Prefabaus. We have Ash Livingston from Homes New South Wales, and Ash is the Acting Director of the Aboriginal Housing Office in New South Wales. And then Peter Nelson. Peter is in the Office of the Queensland Government Architect, so is a colleague I've known for some time, and he's the Director of the MMC Strategy and Design with QBuild. And the way I'm going to run today is to ask our speakers to present their 5 slides in 5 minutes. I'll be watching the time. And then I'll ask them a question while they're still at the podium so that they've got the opportunity to flick back around their slides if there's something they want to refer to, and then we'll convene for a panel discussion. So Jess, I'd like to invite you up.
Good morning, everyone. So, I think I'll start with the pretties. I think that modular housing has come a long way in WA in the last few years. So I'll start with the pretties because the whole point of our brand has been to try and change some of the misconceptions around prefabricated homes. So the business started in 2010 as a very humble granny flat manufacturer, and then became a registered builder and started the prefabricated business arm in 2020. So in that time, we have doubled our growth just about every year, and we've now delivered over 1,200 projects throughout the state. So we're split into 3 brands with quite distinct product offerings. So we have PIQUE, which is our single and 2-story brand, and we build these a 2-story in about 6 months, and then the single stories typically taking about 12 to 16 weeks from the slab to when we land it on site. We also have Fox Modular, which is more into government housing, lifestyle villages, more of a business-to-business play, which is we have a whole yard dedicated to the project base, and then Fox Granny Flats as well, which is where the business started. I think it's probably worthwhile noting that the Fox Granny Flats brand, which used to be mainly for seasonal worker accommodation, what we've noticed recently is that that's becoming a primary housing choice in that granny flat as a small dwelling for people, particularly in the regions where they haven't been able to afford their rent anymore, and they've been able to, fortunately, purchase a home. So we have 3 production facilities. We started off in a little facility in Boom Street in Gnangara, and as our project base has grown, we have now 3 facilities, Malaga, Waterlup and Gnangara. So and that totals over 45,000 square metres. We have over 75 employees, and we have pretty equal gender representation, which I'm really proud of. So whilst our carpenters and some of our trades may not be equal at this stage, we do have a higher weight of female apprentices than we do male. I think that that's been a really fantastic thing just to do it within a construction business. We also have half of our management team is female. So every single home that we deliver, we have a real focus on WA-made products and also Australian products. So we are vertically integrated wherever possible, and we have our own internal plumbing, framing, carpentry teams wherever we can. So I figure I may as well show some of our awards as well. So in 2025, we entered our first Prefabaus Smart Building Awards, and were fortunate enough to take out 2. So the top left, which was for prefabricated pods, and then the bottom right image, which was a client that lost their house to a bushfire, and we were able to get them back up and running in about 6 months. So we also won the HAA Peter Overman Award for housing, and that one was a really special award for us because it meant that we were up against the traditional builders, and we were seen as the Innovative House of the Year. I guess where does modular really hit in the market as well? We work very well on reactive clay sites. The house, which is on the left-hand side, so where there's the crane and the Perth Hills, that was a house that the client had gone through 4 separate builders, and a separate architect. Their earthworks were coming in at $200,000, and we were able to deliver their house after a 5-year journey that they'd had with the other builders, not with us. So in WA, we build a little bit differently in terms of our prefabricated offering. We have 2 pre-tension concrete slab manufacturers in the state, and they are able to deliver a concrete base that really does feel like a standard home. And I think that means that market acceptance of a prefabricated option has been really high. The other component that works really well for prefabricated is a sloping site. So using a sure-foot footing detail and then welding the columns on site, we were able to deliver a house that was on quite a slope, as you can see on the far right, in Preston Beach. So that's basically a few bits in a nutshell.
So, Jess, can you make this one work? Hello? So, Jess, while you're still at the plenum and able to navigate through your slides, tell us about some of the key challenges that you've experienced in the delivery of your modular work. And I'd be keen to understand how some of the sites that you talked about that are a little atypical, you know, we're used to flat ground and slabs and sand, but what about your work in some of the areas beyond that, where there's rock, where there's acid sulfate soils, where there's slopes, things like that?
So I think one of the key benefits is that we can change our methodology quite easily, and we're not believing that we need to have a slab on ground. So we can either submerge a site to get the universal access. For anyone that is in government, please don't ask us to submerge it into clay. We have had a couple of issues where that has been a requirement, and it doesn't really work well. For slope sites, we will weld the bases, and then we will design that so that we are making sure that we're not digging into the land unnecessarily.
Yeah. So that's helping to service land development, building on sites beyond the easy development land, which is our, coastal plains, and heading further south and further east.
Yeah, I think where people have pushed into modular recently has been on those more difficult sites. Mm-hmm. I think it's also been the fact that we haven't had financing options available. So luckily Keystart came to the party with their first offering. There's also been Bankwest and CBA have their loan types as well. So we're not just dealing with almost the difficult sites now, it's modulars beginning to stack within the metropolitan area, and it's beginning to really change. I think the market perception due to a lot of the COVID shortages meant a lot of people were looking for faster options. So I think it's been almost the perfect storm within WA to really change the market and to make prefabricated methods mainstream.
That's great. And given our very predominant typology is double brick or brick and tile. How have you found product supply? Have you been able to find a supply chain that caters for your particular wall types?
Not really. I think it's been quite a big challenge in single stud in particular. So our standard window frames, standard door sizes, everything are very much in WA still made for double brick. I think that there's still a lot of movement within our supply chain to make sure that modular and other modern methods of construction have the products needed.
And we've talked about development or modular on the fringes and inland, but what about some of our more established estates? How do you find delivering modular in those contexts?
So delivering the modular in the more developer-driven estates has been quite fresh, and that has only been made available because of the new financing options. Previously, I don't really think it was reasonable for us to market a house and land package and expect an upfront cash payment, cash progress claims. Any developers as well in the room or in that planning stage, just making sure that the access into the estates is suitable for trucks. So, putting trees on the front verges rather than medium strips, and making sure that there is just that 6 metre access point.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jess. I'd like to invite Damien Crough.
Do I just keep pressing until it gets to... No? Oop. I broke it. I've already broken it. I don't know what I'm doing. I thought I could just press the button.
It's all good. It's all
You made that look so easy. All right. So I'm here just to talk a little bit about some projects that I've been involved in. Prefabaus is a peak industry body that was created in 2013, and these are the projects that led up to the creation of Prefabaus through the challenges that we had in bringing to market a unique prefabricated system in Australia. So in 2007, I was working on a site in Mount Eliza in Victoria. We were building a horse training facility for David Hayes, and I bumped into this architect who sounded like the Godfather, and he said to me, I want to build apartment buildings in a factory. And I thought, this guy's nuts. But we did it. So what we did is we developed some IP. The IP was a structural system. That structural system was called unitised building. And that allowed us to build whole apartment buildings in a factory. And it was quite a unique time in the industry because at that time, the automotive industry was starting to close down. And there was a whole lot of smart engineers that were coming out of Ford and Holden at the time who knew that the industry was closing, wanted to get out early, wanted to find opportunities. So we grabbed a bunch of those people and we started setting up a manufacturing line akin to a car manufacturing line. So taking and transferring all of the knowledge and the skills from the automotive industry into the construction sector. Most people in the business didn't like it. It was so different to what they did normally in their roles as construction people. So we put that into a joint venture with a construction company called Hickory Group, which are a tier 1 contractor. And we brought this technology to market through a few of our own developments, which I'll show you. But in a very short space of time, we built a lot of buildings very quickly in a factory in Melbourne and delivered them all around Australia. We sold the IP to China. We built the Crown Plaza Hotel at Singapore Airport in China out of this IP. And leading to that was an opportunity for me to get in a room with a whole bunch of like-minded people in Australia who were building prefabricated buildings but had no representation. So we decided to start an industry association, and that's called Prefabaus. And hopefully most of you have heard about Prefabaus. We now have 2 board directors in WA, and so we're going to be doing a lot more events in WA and having a lot more presence here. Now, if I press this button, am I going to break it again, or can I use the... Am I good to go? All right, cool. So this is our first building. This is a really interesting project. It's in the middle of Melbourne CBD, in a laneway between Burke Street and Little Collins. Now, this was a substation. 50 years, it was an open-air car park because no one could develop it. Underneath the ground was a substation that powered 20% of Melbourne CBD. This was a really tricky site. To build on it conventionally was maximum 3 or 4 stories in concrete. We put a 9-storey building on this because we built it in a factory. It was a third of the weight, and we delivered it and installed it in 22 working days. That whole building in 22 working days. Does that work? That was my apartment there. I actually bought one and I lived there. Fantastic project, and we had full support from the City of Melbourne. Really easy project. My next project, not so easy. This is in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, in a place called Mitcham, about 20 k's out of the city. When we proposed this, we had 73 objectors for this project from suburbs 10 kilometres away. Now, we went to VCAT and we were awarded the planning permit on the day in VCAT by the judge, which is unheard of. And this project changed the whole structure plan for this area in Melbourne. So on one side of the road, you had what they called the Mega Mile Precinct, which was the JB Hi-Fis and Harvey Normans and all of that. And because of the slope and fall across the road to the other side of the road, it effectively meant we could go 4 stories to match the other side. What the residents didn't know was we increased the property values that they had by 3 times. This building was sold out within a couple of months and very successful. The next project we did was for a client. This is probably my favourite project. It's in a very busy shopping precinct in Moonee Ponds in Melbourne. It's a 280 square metre site. We installed 9 stories in 4 days. We went to the council and we said to them, we can build this conventionally, we can disrupt this whole shopping precinct for over a year, the shop owners will go out of business because we're going to have hoardings up and we're going to make a mess, or let us close the street for 4 days. We actually said 5 days, and we'll build a building. We did it in 4.5 days. The most interesting thing about this was that we had a really committed developer. So by this point in the time of what we were doing, Hickory Group are a large tier 1 contractor. Their contract sizes were $30 million or more. This was only a very small project for them. So as the manufacturer, they decided to get a head contractor to deliver the building. So it was like the reverse. The subby was doing 90% of the work, which was the Hickory Group, and then we had to find another builder to do the 10% site stuff. It took 3 builders and 2 years to find a contractor that understood where the risk was, how to put it together, how to price it, and how to make it happen. But the developer was committed, and we did it, and we delivered it. This one was a really tricky building. When I say that, it's a great looking hotel there, but this was actually a 248 room hotel that was supposed to go up into Port Hedland. We built the whole thing, 248 rooms, had it on a port in Melbourne, ready to go on the ship, and the developer client fell over. So we were left with a 248 room hotel. What do you do when you own a 248 room hotel? Well, we broke it in half. Half went to Bendigo for the new hospital, and the other half went to Darwin for an extension to the Ridges Hotel. So we found a home for it. You can't do that with conventional building. This was an inherent benefit of prefabrication and modular construction. And finally, a Western Australian project, Stellar Apartments in Coburn South. This was really exciting for us because the WA government put skin in the game. They became the developer. They partnered with a local builder, and we built this in Melbourne, put it on a ship, delivered it to Perth, and installed that in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for that, Damien. That was really fascinating. I wasn't aware of the detail and the complexity of some of these projects in the way that they were delivered in stages and potentially delivered on sites that you hadn't anticipated. So that's super interesting. Tell us more about some of the financing models that you think are needed to support MMC products. You mentioned that there were some projects where government became involved. I'm assuming
the easy ones.
I'm assuming that also included banks, etc., collaboratively to unlock some understanding about that.
Yeah, it was really hard to fund these types of projects, and you know, it still is. We have, at Prefabaus, written a standard form contract for Class 1, so that's about to enter the market with the support of CommBank. So within a matter of weeks, there will be a Class 1 domestic contract. But fundamentally, what needs to happen is recognition that this is different to building on site. We build in a factory, and we build really fast. And our standard form contracts that exist are designed around building something on site, and we don't do it. So that's the fundamental thing that needs to change, recognition of that. And there are mechanisms. So we've got the Personal Property Securities Act and the PPSR, which is the register. Effectively what can happen, and does happen, is like a car, it's given a VIN number or a unique identifier for each module or component which is attached to it. And then once value is added to that in the factory, the bank is happy to pay against it. But there's still a significant amount of bank guarantees that need to be put into place. And this has always been the biggest challenge, is because if you're bank guaranteeing against all the work you're doing, it's devaluing your business and it makes it hard to grow. And that's what we're trying to change. So we have, I think, solved it for Class 1 domestic dwellings, but this is Class 2, and that's our next biggest project, is to come up with good financing models.
That's really interesting. And tell us more about the 3D modelling and the 3D printing technology, the digital twin information, the data gathered and how that's informed.
So we're really seeing a shift to what we call DFMA, Design for Manufacture and Assembly. And, you know, there's a whole raft of sort of digital platforms out there like the Autodesk Suite and others that allow for digital design, digital twins. And most of our members who are producing prefab homes are using this type of approach, 3D modelling and digital twins. And what we're seeing that allow us to do is to embed a certain amount of data into that model as well, which can help in lots of things like the financial payment structures, progress claims, being able to validate the attachment of components and materials into that home. But I think what's even more exciting really is we're starting to see 3D printing, and we just supported what's called a CRC, a Cooperative Research Council project on additive manufacturing, and that's a $271 million research project which has just been funded. So we're a partner organisation to that, which means our members can come in and be involved in projects around 3D printing. We have multiple companies in Australia who are members of ours who are already 3D printing homes and other parts of buildings. And some of the exciting stuff that I've seen for buildings like this is where they're printing together steel and glass as structural facades. So effectively you'll be able to drop modules or components of buildings in while there's a printer going around and printing the facade to the building. This is already happening in Australia with Australian technology, so this is exciting.
Thanks so much, Damien. Join me in thanking Damien. I'd now like to welcome Ash to the stage. We're going to play musical chairs. Here we go.
You might need to show me how to use this too.
Oh, you just
Go back.
While Ash is setting up, Ash is from Homes New South Wales, and he's the acting director of the Aboriginal Housing Office.
Yeah. Ah, there we go.
Just get back to that page when I'm up, Ash.
Hey, go back to that one, please. Yeah. There we go. So yeah, I'm Ash Livingston. I work for Homes New South Wales and was working for Aboriginal Housing Office for a period as the Director of Property. I'm just here today to talk about AHO's MMC journey and a little bit about the agency and why we went down that path. So AHO is a statutory body in New South Wales to provide housing for Aboriginal people across New South Wales. So we have about 10,000 properties, remote and regional areas and into metro. And we have an obligation to provide housing continually in regional and remote areas. People want to stay on country, they want to stay in community, and we need to find ways to do that. The conventional methods that we were using, there was trade scarcity, value for money was high. We had to meet cultural requirements and those new environmental standards. And that meant conventional construction just wasn't working. We weren't meeting demand. So we had to look at other ways of delivering these homes. We asked ourselves, how could we build faster, smarter and more sustainably? But we still wanted to do delivery that creates real social impact through Aboriginal delivered new supply. AHO contracts, we specifically want high Aboriginal participation and spend with Aboriginal companies. So we embraced MMC. I think that's... Sorry, I go back there. So since we embraced MMC, we delivered 142 homes, and that was about 25% of our housing delivery for that period from when we started MMC. We tested a lot of different methods. Podular construction is one, and there's a case study that I'll speak to after that around podular. Most of our delivery was modular housing. We tested structural insulated panels, CLT, so cross-laminated timber, and most recently we delivered a 3D printed home in Dubbo, New South Wales, and I'll talk to that as well. I think all of the approaches that we tested significantly reduced build times, in many cases improved energy efficiency, but also provided that high Aboriginal employment and training opportunities. So I'll speak a bit more about this case study. So it was the innovation project, and I think this was really the catalyst for AHO's MMC delivery moving forward. The aim was to position the AHO with an efficient end-to-end process. So that's from procurement into delivery and then handover. So we need to look at ways that we could procure builders and engage and get this delivered. And that was to focus on building those homes in regional and remote. So in this project, we partnered with the University of Technology and corrective services industries to build a podular system with interchangeable pods that were built by Aboriginal inmates in corrective service industries facilities in New South Wales. Then we engaged Aboriginal contractors or contractors with high Aboriginal participation to do the site installs. Through that project as well, we engaged, so these were placed in Moree. We engaged with community through face-to-face sessions and also a design day to workshop the cultural considerations on the end user elements like the fit outs and the layout of these homes. So community informed the end design of these properties. It was really fantastic, and we got the design, the culturally appropriate designs that we needed for that area. There was also an independent valuation done. There was significant reduction in build cost. We achieved 24% Aboriginal participation. There was higher satisfaction from both our tenants and our providers, and I think that was a lot to do with input into design and everything as well. And then we established that end-to-end design and construct process that we've used since then to deliver those 142 homes. So a really successful project. And like I said, it was the catalyst for everything we've done since. The next project we tested was in Dubbo. We piloted 3D concrete printing. We engaged a company called Contour 3D. I think you might have seen them on the block sometime back. They did the pool house there. And they worked alongside an Aboriginal building company as well, Aboriginal Sustainable Homes. They printed the house the duplex in 13 days. It doesn't sound that impressive when I heard you built towers in 5 or something, but I thought it was good.
That's new technology.
So just some outcomes: reduced build time by about 50% compared to conventional, cut costs by about 10%, but it was a new technology, so we were testing things. Really durable building, so it's 55 MPa concrete for those who know about concrete. Energy and thermally efficient. Really good environmentally, so the concrete mix has recycled material in it. And I remember being out on site one day and they printed most of the walls, and I looked in the bin and there was just coffee cups. So, limited building waste and everything that you'd see a lot in conventional. So it was impressive. We built a conventionally similar design duplex in Dubbo close to the same time. So we engaged building 4.9 CRC to put some sensors in, and we're testing air quality, energy usage. I spoke to them the other day, and preliminary results show that in the 3D printed home there's less energy usage. They're not using the air conditioner as much and everything. So good early outcomes. That was the evaluation. So next for the AHO, our delivery, the 142 homes have been, that cottage style construction across regional and remote. There is a few sites that we have now to look at sort of medium density class 2 and podular type work that we just heard about. So it's something that we could look at in the future and test that out. There's a few more precast trials in regional areas, and I think we'll do another 3D printed home. Hey, Femi. But just, I suppose in closing, I just wanted to say that, we recognise, I think testing out and trying MMC, and you have to manage risk, and I think AHO do that well. But you've got to actually give it a go, because if you don't progress. So I think it's been really good by previous people in AHO, FAMI and everything as well, is we do explore new approaches, learn from the experience, and that drives innovation and those really good outcomes. So I think if you wait for perfection, plus I think the industry needs us as government, and I know QBuild are doing it really well to actually get out and start doing this, because we do have a housing crisis. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ash, very curious to hear more about the community engagement that was undertaken for the Moree project. It sounded deeper than our usual community engagement, more like a collaboration or a co-design exercise.
Yeah.
Tell us about the, what you feel were the real outcomes of that, and the value in that, the value in investing the time and the energy into that.
Yeah. I think it's important, and I think if anyone who went early in the morning, I think Stacey was talking about communities are different and everything like that and what they need. And when I started AHO, a lot of the construction was built, and there were architects in Sydney designing houses for Sydney, and they were being placed out in these areas like Moree and Burke. So that was really that opportunity to hear from community, design exactly what they want. And it was things like, outdoor living areas, a secondary living space internally, the 2 bathrooms and all of that. So community got, and as I said too, the satisfaction was there at the end. We also did that broadly for AHO's design guidelines. So we had Aboriginal community housing providers and other community representatives come and workshop good design for culturally appropriate design for all our future developments, and that's something that AHO continually needs to do. So absolutely important. Yeah.
And MMC, occasionally when paired with training opportunities, is adding a whole extra layer of innovation. And the Gundi employment program that was held with corrective services, that's something that would have layered in some very long-term social and community benefits. We'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So alongside working on the houses, there was training. I think it was like Cert 2 in carpentry, and a lot of white card training as well. But a lot of the inmates, alongside of that too, there was literacy, because a lot of the inmates, I think they had, because of circumstances, had limited education. So this really provided them an opportunity on release to be employable. I did go up to a couple and speak to them. We went out to a couple of and what they said to me is it really gave them a purpose, and they were building homes for communities that they lived in. So it was that incentive and everything. So yeah, there was a couple that actually re-offended, come back in, and then joined the course and done that. And I hope that they're out working and out now. But yeah. Like I said, it's AHO's focus is the homes as well as providing those social outcomes as well. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you, Ash.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh no.
I know how to fix it now.
Can you? You're a futurist.
I'm a fast learner.
Look at this.
Where are you?
That's why we need.
Is that you?
That's why we need an industry. That's my picture. So I look that different in real life. Off we go.
Over to you.
Look, thanks to everyone. So look, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Modern Methods of Construction program in Queensland, which is part of the Housing and Public Works Department. I reside in the Office of the Government Architect and privileged to work with QBuild. Architects and builders can work together collaboratively, which is fantastic. The program itself, fundamentally it's about well-designed modern homes, and there was a candid conversation yesterday around good design. So we're not talking about dongers or demountables or tiny homes on wheels, we're talking about National Construction Code compliant housing, and that's the non-negotiable. Very proud of this project. It's fresh out of the oven. That's a Class 2 building in Princess Street in Bundaberg by Hutchinson Modular with Cox Architects. That's where we need to head. And that's a Class 2 building. It's a apartment building masquerading as a townhouse, so that's a fire-rated floor, so that's 6 units of accommodation, 2 modules per dwelling. Very proud of where we've where we've come from. Why do we do that? That's the same project under construction, because really we need to move away from carbon-intensive materials, particularly in a Queensland context with material and trade shortages, which will only get worse with a major infrastructure spend, particularly as we drive towards the 2032 Olympics. We need to look at lightweight systems. We've got lots of Kiwi concreters and formworkers and scaffolders, so we do get a lot of New Zealanders in, but we don't have enough. So we really need to prepare for a kind of a cliff, a trade cliff, where we need to diversify and start to look at alternative methods of construction that actually addresses those labour shortages and moves from a skilled to an unskilled kind of workforce. The program, well, we've since late 2022, so it's been a few years now. To date, we're up to about 800 houses, dwellings, which is a great achievement. If we can crack the 1,000, that'd be great. We need a couple more zeros at the end of that to make a big difference. But largely we're dealing with social housing and government employment or essential worker housing, and that's teachers, police officers, so government employment, as opposed to key worker housing or the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker that builds sustainable communities. And unfortunately that's something that we don't deliver. That's probably an example of a typical project early on in the life of the program. That's about 13 dwellings, government employment housing in Texas on the New South Wales-Queensland border. And that was a great local company, Westbuilt in Warwick, working with a great Brisbane-based architectural practice in James Davison Architects and Shamrock Civil doing the civil works, and I'll talk about the pieces in a moment. To date, the next step for us is to really move into what the Class 1 and Class 2 homes. So we've got about 250 single-storey social homes delivered like strawberry jam across the state, with 3 modular companies across 87 sites, and that's a typical rendering of a standard plan that we've worked up. That's a rendering by Modscape Robotics. And on the right is the Class 2s that I spoke about, which is 2 and 3 storey, and we've got about 220 of those across 17 sites, and that's the really exciting space for us, and particularly for community housing providers. We need to move up into higher density outcomes, and we've got 4 manufacturers in that space, and that's an image by Hutchinson Modular with Rothy Lohman Architects. Unashamedly, we've taken a bottom-up approach. So we recognise, like, Damien, you're a futurist, like you've really sold high density, and you're an outlier, I'll be honest. By far the industry is kind of grounded in kind of Class 1 single-storey detached and duplexed housing historically. We feel like we needed to engage with that manufacturing industry and pivot them and move them into the missing middle. Why? Because they're simpler, more nimble organisations. They have a lower carbon kind of thinking. They're already embracing lightweight solutions. They look at steel and timber. At the other end, we've got big contractors that are really hardwired to concrete, and so that bottom-up approach is really fundamental. A common theme in the conference has really been about capability building and collaboration, and I think that's really an important aspect that it would be good to unpack with the panel. We need to move from a house to a high-rise, but we need to do that as a progressive, and the baby steps across the program has been really exciting, and to see that growth within the industry itself. The parts of the program, it's like a kind of a lucky dip, and really we've got 2 components, the house and the site works. We did dabble in split contracts initially, and that really caused a lot of issues, so we are moving back to head contractor roles where you do the full turnkey service, the A to the D. And that's placed pressure on industry to actually step up and really kind of start to partner with traditional builders and civil contractors. We need to build a mission-fit ecosystem. Rather than being really siloed, I think there's too much pressure on manufacturers that they're the panacea. It's manufacturing, partnering with other forms of construction and building that capacity. Where we would split contract is when we take the C piece out, which is that enabling site works piece, but that requires a kind of a pipeline of land and government being really kind of progressive in terms of how they do those enabling bits of infrastructure. So that's where, I'm a bit dyslexic, putting the C first followed by the A, B and the D, so it's not necessarily sequential. Ash, you kind of made a few comments, and it's really pertinent within the program in that we can think deeply around standardisation, but we're delivering homes, we're not delivering mobile phones or cars. It can be a bit nerdy, particularly architects, they kind of think intently around standardisation, and really we need to not overthink that. The more you think about it, the bigger the problem gets, you don't actually end up doing anything. We need to talk about how we take those standard parts and actually how we make real homes, and that's that talking piece, or the session early today, it's about listening and negotiating as equals. And that image is a wonderful slide of the wonderful CEO of the Torres Strait Island Regional Council, James William, talking about how we actually do culturally appropriate housing in the Torres Strait. And James is a wonderful human being. But as you said, Ash, we need to just make stuff and learn through making. With a bit of Catholic forgiveness, it's not perfect. You dust yourself off, you go again and again. And that's that time to deliver. I sound like I'm kind of at an ALP 1972 conference here. I won't start singing like Little Paddy. That'll be the closing session today. We just need to make stuff and not overthink it, not overtalk it. And recognise that we do make mistakes, just don't make them twice. And that's been the strength of the program, and that's why we're at 800. And have we had failures? Absolutely. Like, this is not the grass is greener, but you've just got to keep going and reset. And that is the presentation. Thanks for remembering.
Thank you, Peter. With QBuild, Queensland is the last state in Australia that's got its associated public works delivery, yep. Or it's delivering built form. With that connection to the delivery aspect, there'd be a lot of data that's gathered. And then working in government, as we are, we're often trying to hold up the quality whilst competing with some pretty intense time and cost parameters. The data that you're gathering, has the department learned from that data?
Oh, gosh, to be honest, we've got client groups. So QBuild is the delivery of building activities, so as a project manager or as a builder. And so we actually deliver projects on behalf of diverse client groups: education, health, housing. Housing resides within our department. We have client groups that unashamedly want the trifecta of cost, quality and time. Quality should just be assumed as a given, no matter how you build, which is that NCC conversation. I think the time piece, and actually kind of that speed of delivery and Damien and the way we can deliver it at speed is the superpower of MMC. But in government procurement and contracting decisions upstream, we tend to kind of look at the upfront capital cost, not about the benefits of MMC in terms of speed of delivery. That's the superpower that we need to value at the point of tendering and decision making, so that we give MMC the best opportunity to succeed. And that's just not at tender and post-tender, that's actually the approval process, so the due diligence, the feasibility, the planning process. And we're very proud to actually start to accelerate the end-to-end process, the commencement and the completion, to try and get that down to a 12-month period. In the social housing space, that can often drag on for 2 and 3 years as we kind of overthink preliminary design and schematic design, and we tender at the end of SD with an AS 4300 contract. So early contractor involvement, not overthinking it, engaging the market, and don't let the speed of the actual construction be watered down by governments taking too long to make a decision about what to build.
Understood. And I'm going to hit you up with the P word, procurement. So obviously there's been a variety of methodologies that you've used, but what are the lessons that you've learned that might inform processes going forward?
I think fundamentally it's that kind of non-price criteria, the value add, looking at whole of life costs, not just the upfront capital cost. Procurement and contracting is really unsexy, and I think people that don't work within government don't realise how glacial and conservative contracts and procurement are, and that's about risk appropriation. That's where inevitably we'll always actually ask for a principal contractor to take contractor risk collaboratively, and that's been a really interesting thing in industry to say, if you don't want to be a principal contractor manufacturer, find someone who will find a friend. And that consortia, that capacity building is really important, and it's really been lovely to see manufacturers playing to their strengths, but also understanding their weaknesses and creating procurement and contracting pathways that kind of enable that capability, that capacity building exercise.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks, everyone.
So now we're going to head into our Q&A session. It is 10 minutes to 12, so we've got some good time for some healthy discussions. We're going to try and cover as many questions as we can. Our first one appears to be over here. Thanks, Elise. And we're going to try and keep our questions nice and succinct so we can cover more.
Thank you. It's Joanne Hickman from the City of Hobart. You mentioned that you are able to achieve compliance with the National Construction Code. I'm interested to understand what level of NatHERS star rating, energy efficiency and livable housing standards you were able to achieve in your projects. That's probably directed to everyone.
Thank you. For us, it's always, except for WA didn't adopt the livable housing portion of it. So when we are delivering to state government, we do. But other than that, our standard Class 1 homes, we just deliver to the NCC. And we always have the same NAITHS 7-star requirements.
And very proud that we've baked in gold. So when we did the assessment around standardisation, regardless of whether the level of accessibility, so when we move into that two-storey form, it's either lift served or stairs served. So internally, they all meet LAHA gold with some sprinkles. And why argue around 100 mils in a corridor? And enhances that age in place opportunity where whilst the dwelling might be stairs served, you could put a lift in and then you actually can turn everything into an LAH gold. So I think silver is like, we should kill off silver and just bake in gold and just make lots of it. And in terms of NatHERS, we need to meet that 7-star. I'm very proud in Queensland under the Queensland Development Code, which is the relationship between the ABCB, the National Construction Code, and then state-based development codes. I think there's a relationship between the two. Under the QDC in Queensland, we enable a 1-star credit if you deliver a 12 square metre deck with a ceiling fan. Now, that may not mean much to Victorians, but in Queensland, we live outside. And we don't want to be penalised for actually large openings and outdoor space that might be culturally appropriate in many instances, or just a lifestyle choice for most Queenslanders. So that's a really good example of kind of regulatory frameworks, not competing against the other, complementing. We conform to the NCC, but we actually have state-based kind of credits, and that's a really good example in which every house we deliver comes with a really good outdoor space. And that's that kind of differentiation between what we deliver and a donga. Like, it's not a box, it's not a shipping container, it's a real home. It's a housing first approach.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make, is that, you know, we're talking about homes which are National Code compliant. They're designed with a 50-year design life. They meet all of the standards that a traditional, conventional built home meets. However, they are manufactured and assembled in a facility in a controlled environment, which makes it a lot easier to assemble them to tighter tolerances. Most of our manufacturers' members have digital platforms that follow the manufacturing, that have inspection test plans, that have standard operating procedures, that are recorded, that are validated, that are signed off at every stage. So there is a lot of information and data and traceability around how these buildings are put together than you can ever get by building something on site. So inherently they perform better. Inherently it is easier to make them perform to a standard.
Thank you, Damien.
Yeah, and it's the same for AHA. Yeah, meet NCC, NADAS 7, and then livability standards as well. I suppose sometimes we're building site typology is an issue around like the livability and disability stuff, but generally, gold.
Thank you. We have two gentlemen here that have questions, Elise.
Thanks to the panel. Those, all four presentations have been fantastic. Thank you. I'm Roger Gibbons. Just a quick question, maybe to Jess, on costs. I've been told by the people outside who are doing modular housing presentations that we have these major advantages with time savings and not having to have so much labour on site. Now that's fantastic, but they aren't able to tell me that the cost per square metre of a like-for-like house is a major saving, although we've heard on the Indigenous housing front maybe 10%, but in terms of just delivering mainstream housing, can we get some cost savings now, or do we have to wait till we scale up to get them?
So I think where we were previously, when we were looking at doing a 4x2 analysis within our fresco delivered in Perth, we used to be marginally more expensive than a traditional builder. And I've noticed over the last few years, as we have becoming much more efficient in terms of our industry, we've become about probably 10% cheaper than the latest comparisons that I've seen. So it's been both that on-site cost savings by us being able to deliver faster, but also then for the first time it has shifted into a more affordable product.
I think the other thing is when you build a one-off home, it's expensive. A one-off architecturally designed home is expensive. A one-off architecturally designed modular home is also going to be expensive. But what we're seeing is this opportunity for standardisation of components and elements, which is starting to reduce the cost. So if you want to build a home with PIQUE modular, they have a standardised elements to it, and then there's a customisable elements. The Japanese do this really well. It's called mass customisation. They build homes on a production line. Toyota build 40,000 homes a year the same way they build a Corolla, and they're really, really high quality and really efficient and really affordable because of that. So I think we're going to get to this point very soon. There's a lot that's been learnt in the industry around the supply chain and procurement, and once we get to a scale where we do have a higher penetration, at the moment we're talking about 8% of the industry, it being prefab. Once we start to grow that, and we're getting there very quickly. We went from 3% to 5% to 8% in the last 10 years. It is going to grow very quickly, and I think you're going to see that those costs are going to come down because the supply chain will have the volumes, the manufacturers will understand how to engage and benefit that, and that will drive the cost down over time. But you know, we still have a little bit way to go before we're significantly cheaper than conventional construction.
And I'll add to that in terms of the social housing program. We need to, in terms of comparative costs, we need apples with apples. And currently within the program, we've delivered largely Class 1 detached housing on large blocks of land in the middle of nowhere that aren't high yielding. There's one or two or three per dwelling, with the outliers that I spoke about. Comparatively, social housing largely delivers one-bedroom units of accommodation in more urban environments, low GFA, usually 15 to 20 dwellings per development with a piece of land that's serviced. So you've got an apple and an orange. That's why the Class 2 stuff that we're delivering is really good, because we're starting to actually deliver product that's actually more aligned with a social housing need, which is higher density. And what we are finding, and we need to crunch the numbers, is that we are seeing that there's a cost decrease, and we're actually kind of starting to be in a value for money kind of comparative. The critical thing, as I spoke about, is that you need to value speed and scale.
So I don't want to have a conversation where you might get a great tender result in Thargomindah with one local builder that is close to retirement and can only do one thing a year, but gee, the price is great, and that price becomes the rule of law around what value for money looks like. Because then you kind of go, well, can that one builder do 100 houses in 12 months? So let's not have that conversation if we need to deliver at speed, at scale.
Did you have anything to add to that, Ash? Yep. Next question. Thank you.
Look, my question is probably directed to Damien in the sense that, notwithstanding, we had a session on quality of construction early on in the conference, and the data was delivered to us that was that 70% of new building constructs have an issue, either cracked walls, gaps, leaks, and so on and so forth. So are you saying in terms of the actual tighter controls that factory-based manufacturing of housing can bring that defect level down? And what's been your, now that it's been around for a number of years now, what's your experience of the post-construction problems that might have occurred? And perhaps if you can touch on your own lived experience in that high-rise apartment in terms of the quality.
I think quality-wise, what we're seeing is, and post occupancy, reasonably good. There still is some issues, and and particularly with what we were doing back then. So if I talk a little bit about that, we were the only company in Australia that was producing 10-storey apartment buildings in a factory and delivering them all around the country. There were some learnings from that. From my own experience, the worst thing that I could talk about was that I had a European laundry, and when the dryer was going, sometimes the wall would rattle a little bit. That was the worst thing that happened. The quality. So what was the first part of the question? I can hear
about reducing defects.
In terms of Gary from the town of Cambridge, given that the industry's been around for close on, say, a 10-year period, retrospectively, what have been the quality problems that you've learned from the process? And can it be more? Are you suggesting it's going to be more tightly controlled with in-factory manufacturing?
Yeah. Okay. So that was that lived experience example. Obviously, building that building, living in it myself. I think that was a really good thing for us, for some of us to buy those apartments and live in them, for that exact reason. We had full steel structures that you learn about then, resilient mounting of things, and honestly, the fix for that was we had a ASCO dishwasher which had these mounts on that fixed the issue. So you could just buy a dishwasher, right? Washing machine. But inherently, what we're talking about is things being built in a factory, designed on a digital platform. Most of our member manufacturers use a digital 3D design platform, embedding into that the data and the information, so the traceability of the materials, where they came from, what's been installed, how it's been installed, how long those materials last for. You have that data, it's available, it's there, it's embedded. And I think that's a good starting point, because on site, you have no idea what's being built, and there is a lot of substitution of materials and things that go on, and you just never going to know what's happened on a site that has minimal control. You might have when you're talking about volume housing, you've got one project manager who's running around to 20 or 30 sites and looking after 20 or 30 homes or more at one time. So there's very little control of what happens on that site. Here you have processes in place that capture that data, that information, and record that information and embed it into that product. So I think we're at a better starting point. We're able to then have the traceability. If there are any defects or issues, we can trace them back. Or what happened? Who did that work? Who installed that component? Who signed it off? It's all there. It's all captured. So I think, we have a lot better knowledge now around how to do things in a factory that mean we have a better product and improving the industry.
But Jess and Ash, I'll challenge. At the end of the day, this isn't just widgets out of a factory. They actually have to land on a piece of dirt. Maybe I'm hanging around too many chippies. Don't underestimate traditional trades and the value of a good site foreman to do a good site set out, because the defects that we're seeing in the program is less about this thing out of the factory, but it's how it actually lands on site. It's the unsexy stuff. And so this can't be just all about a manufacturing panacea. It's actually about good civil and traditional builders. Jess, you experienced that?
have definitely, don't know if this is working. So for us, we can deliver the best product, and then we had a situation where a truck driver might have dropped a building on the installs. So we ended up having to replace that module because we thought it was better. I actually live in a modular house, so converted a 1950 old Defence Force house in Mosmer Park to a modular, and the quality has been amazing. And so I have a very lived experience of the limited amount of defects with that millimetre perfection that we have. But then I also had a fantastic construction site supervisor as well that was there day to day. So I think it is the same as normal construction as long as you have the right experienced personnel. In fact, better in my instance.
And on the AHO, it's exactly the same. I think the defects we find is from the site work. Yeah, it's the contractor out there setting out properly and everything. So exactly.
And that's a dialing up or dialing back the level of site works depending on local trades and capacity building within community. And it's not a one size fits all. So there's that kit of parts approach where you might actually build more volumetrically if there's less on local trades, or you might want to switch that. Play to your strengths, and it can't be a one size fits all.
And what you touched on, the delivery phase and the potential impacts that, the damages or defects that can occur that way. We often hear in WA that, modular or prefab for the regions would naturally incur a huge journey, which of course has a lot of carbon embedded into that. And we know that vehicle movement on sites is a big source of carbon. But arguably, the locating of all of those materials to a regional location. What are your thoughts on that in terms of waste or efficiency, or what has the data told you around transport?
I got a little bit of information, and this is not a regional project at all. This was a Melbourne project by Mirvac. And they built 4 townhouses conventionally, and then right next to it they built 4 townhouses using a combination of panelised systems and bathroom pods and other elements. And they captured the data. And when they were looking at things like waste, they didn't only look at material waste, they looked at the amount of phone calls, emails, site inspections. There was an over 90% reduction in all of those things from that site to the other site. But also in respect to the bathroom pods that were installed on site, there was 7 hours versus 1,000 hours for the bathroom, or whatever it was. So there's significant reduction in the amount of tradespeople driving to site to install materials on a conventional site, as opposed to a whole piece of the building just being delivered. So if you look at it that way, the disruption, the noise, the continual movement around a site when you're building conventionally, as opposed to large pieces just being dropped in, then the carbon footprint sort of argument, I think, goes back to the favour of modular construction.
And we're bulk ordering our materials into our factories as well. So I think that only having that one delivery drop-off instead of delivering to 60 different sites is already... And then we, have a volumetric approach, and then we're just delivering once to site. So I think that drastically reduces.
In addition to waste, like the construction industry has incredibly high rates of suicide, which is really sad. So there's a health and wellbeing issue, and Jess, you were saying to create safe factory environments that allow diversity of workforce to go home each day, and they're not driving long distance. It's about building a workforce that actually is going to work into the future, because we'll have a big exit of trades, a whole lot of trade guys that are just tired. And so we need to value that resource. It's not always about a robot, it's about a human being and that ability to actually make stuff.
But it's about having a centralised workplace that's familiar, and you've got the same colleagues, and it feels like a home, feels like another home.
Absolutely, and it's close to where you live, it's close to daycare, it's close to your support networks. It's like, and that's probably because I work with QBuild. They put the worker at first. It's that human-centred approach around this is a real thing. We're putting people in houses and we're asking people to build them. and we need to treat them with compassion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Mark Thomas from Keystart. My question is probably for Jess, but could apply to other panel members as well. Jess, in your presentation, you talked a bit about the mindset that consumers have about a modular product. And I've had the fortune of seeing your products firsthand, and they're amazing. But what do you think needs to be done to really try and capture the hearts and minds of consumers about, you know, seeing modular as a great option?
So Damien just whispered in my ear, TV show. Damien has, with Prefabaus, put together a really amazing TV show that fortunately one of the builds didn't happen in time, so my build ended up jumping in, so you have to watch it. But I think that one of the number one things that came up with the Prefabaus conference was everyone's voting in that it was that the shift in the mindset was the most important thing that really needed to happen in prefabricated homes. And I think it's just, if people come out and see them, their entire perception shifts. And I hope that happened when you came out. And I think the more that we end up presenting out to market, I think if Development WA would love to put on an innovation precinct, I think that would probably be the number one thing in WA that could probably showcase the product. It worked really well when that happened for more the medium density two-storey products in WA, and hopefully the same can happen for modern methods of construction.
Just on the AHL, I think there was probably some scepticism when we were talking about building, you know, modular, and there was a perception they'd be like shipping containers or something. But since we've been building and we established our design guidelines and they're all built to that, our providers and the people, our clients, are exceptionally happy with what we're putting out there. So just in our space, we've seen sort of that mindset change a little bit.
Which is you just got to build it. Like
Right.
early on in the program, we set up we couldn't call it a display centre because it wasn't open to the public, but a training centre at North Shore Hamilton, one of the EDQ PDAs, and I think it's four dwellings. We had over 600 people through, clients, government, and the barometer was the I live here. And the amount of people that would leave going, oh, geez, I wasn't expecting that. So case studies and demonstration is so important. So I'd really encourage the WA government to actually build something and then bring people through to demystify, destigmatise what we're doing.
And we've sort of stolen Pete's idea too, because with the TV show, which will be going on Channel 9 in February, we've been pulling a few levers. So we've written a standard form Class 1 domestic contract, which will be in the market very soon. You've got Commonwealth Bank and others that have developed financing products that allow funds to flow to manufacturers through the consumer. Big tick. The TV show will drive demand, but you need somewhere where people can go and kick the tyres, so to speak. So Nick and I, who's another Prefabaus board director here in the front row, we've been working very closely with Victorian Government around a program of a display village in Victoria, but we want to see those in every state. And that came about because we went and visited the one that Pete did in Queensland, which wasn't to the public, but you know, what better way for people to touch and feel and see that these are great homes that anyone would be happy to live in. So yeah, we've taken your idea.
Pleasure.
Elise, we have a question here in the second row. Sorry, I didn't give you the heads up.
Great questions, by the way.
They are.
Hi, my name's Yvette Park and I'm from the Northern Territory, so we live on the kind of extreme end, I suppose, of housing construction in terms of cost, climatic conditions, and, you know, particularly in remote communities where we've heard so much about the demand for new supply, the need for really durable assets. So I'm interested kind of to hear from the panel about durability in terms of how people live in social housing dwellings, but also interested about the hotel in Darwin and how that was designed differently for climatic conditions and cyclone coating.
Like I said, these are homes that are durable. They're just. I think the difference is they're just built in a factory. So I suppose New South Wales isn't as remote as Northern Territory. Like we go out to Burke and Brewarrina and all that, but we consider the thermal qualities and everything. So what we're putting out there is, all the feedback is really good, but obviously not to the extreme that you have in Northern. We're not as remote, but yeah.
And look, lived and worked in the Northern Territory, was involved in some of the growth town stuff, not my finest moment. And that was at the back of the intervention and the Napari program. So there's a long history of really poor outcomes in First Nations community that have received bad MMC outcomes, and we can't go back there. We're doing a piece of work with QUT around trying to build a whole of life maintenance, like a framework that looks at maintenance, employment and health outcomes, and trying to monetize that to understand that the upfront cost, build it once. In the Torres Strait is a really good example that it's $500,000 to take a mistake off the Torres Strait, and it's because you end up with huge waste, or a poorly designed roof with dissimilar metals. The cost for maintenance and renewal is extraordinarily high. It's really hard to have that whole of life conversation because they'll just benchmark that against an SEQ context and say, we're getting, for every one house in the Torres Strait, we'll get 5 apartments and if it's just about numbers, then it's a race to the bottom. And so with the stuff we're doing with T-Circ, it's a full timber build, low carbon. If we're using steel, it's stainless steel. It's a kit of parts approach, can be built volumetrically. It's expensive, but that's about materiality. That's about making the right decisions, because the long-term trajectory is terrible when buildings start to fall apart, the health consequences, and you know that, Ash. It's depressing.
So we have a very sophisticated and diverse supply chain in Australia. We're very lucky. We did some research recently and mapped our whole supply chain, and we broke it down by 6 different categories of prefabrication, all the way from a fully finished module like Jess does, down to sort of components and elements. There's 1,190 companies in Australia that participate in that supply chain. It's sophisticated, different materials, different systems, different techniques. So it's not one size fits all. There is so many different ways to build using modular construction in Australia and to deliver an outcome that works for that application. So the design is really important, but also the engagement with supply chain. So what we really try to encourage is, if you want to build something, go and talk to the manufacturer. Go to their factory, they'll host you. They have a lot of knowledge and expertise that they will provide to you for that project and for that outcome. So it can only benefit everybody. So what we're trying to say is go to the supply chain, engage with them, talk to them, learn from them, and use that in the design of a project. Now, going to your comment about those big buildings that we were doing, we did one in South Hedland and Darwin, and I think I'm not sure it's Category D or Category 4, Region D or whatever it is. It was the most cyclonic, and it was a simple thing. We had a good structural engineer who worked with us to design it to meet those standards. That was it. We had specific connection details that meant that the thing wouldn't fly away in a cyclone, and it met the code. And we just worked with Robert Bird Group engineers, and they got it done. So yeah, again, it was just a collaboration.
For us, because we do it quite a lot up in Region C and Region D in WA, and it's about a $10,000 upgrade to go into the cyclonic.
We've got time for probably 2 more questions. The gentleman down the back.
Thank you. A question for Damien. Damien, could you tell us a little bit more about one of the particular apartment complexes in terms of, you mentioned the speed of assembly on site. What was the time frame to build it in the factory? And the second part of my question is, are there any differences in ongoing maintenance requirements from those buildings compared to a standard apartment complex?
Good question, and yeah, I didn't sort of go into the detail about, yes, it was 5 days on site, but it was 6 months in the factory. But I mean, still 6 months for an 8-storey building is pretty fast. So yes, but the benefit is You start on site. That had a basement. It had, I think, a couple of basements in it. It had a precast concrete core that went up the full height. It had a transfer deck at level 1, and then the modules were stacked on it from there. So while all of that work's being undertaken on site, building the basement, building the core, building the main structure, in parallel to that, you're doing the apartments in the factory. So that meant the overall program was roughly 6 months to build that building. So that's one of the key benefits of doing it that way. What was the second part of the question?
Are there any maintenance?
So the way we design
building and a modular apartment complex.
So the way we designed them is that we stack all of the services above. So the services from the top floor go all the way down to the bottom floor. There's no transferring of services between floors, which make things complex. There's services risers and access to those services risers. That means you can maintain them. So just smart design, really, which allows you to maintain the building in a really functional way.
Another question? Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, panel. That's been really, really interesting. I'm just interested in future circularity.
So I'll touch a little bit on that. So Prefabaus is on an advisory board for RMIT's Post-Carbon Research Centre. We're running some projects at the moment on decarbonisation of prefabricated housing. We've got a workshop coming up actually in November. But we are very much focused on this. But what we're trying to push through the industry is this approach of what we call DFMA, Design for Manufacture and Assembly. And that suggests, if we're doing it that way, that it's disassembled, it's reused, it's recyclable. If we look around us at the built environment, most of what's built to this point in time is going in the bin, or we have to find a way to reuse it, whatever that is. We think that with smart design, DFMA, we can design buildings to be reused, recovered, repurposed, and that's a real push for us around circularity of the industry.
Thank you. I was going to wrap up questions with a question of my own for the panel. So for WA, we're a very different sized state. We're a big state. We have fewer regional centres. We cover the broadest range of climate zones, but we face the same issues regards housing demand, supply chain, cost of construction. What do you see as being the potential, the opportunities for WA to embrace or even lead in MMC?
I would say the Housing Innovation Fund that's just been announced, $50 million in grants from the WA government is a really good start. What a great thing to support manufacturers, to invest in technology, to apply for grants. I think this is going to be a really, really exciting. We had a little event last night where someone from WA government was talking about it. The grants are opening in 2 weeks, I think. It was 2 weeks. But yeah, that's $50 million for companies to invest and scale up and buy some technology, maybe some robots, some automation. I think that's where the industry needs to go. We're really pushing this advanced manufacturing sort of shift, digitisation, industrialised construction. Once you have that, you're competitive globally. And I think WA government's really committed to that. So that's a great signal from them.
Yeah, amazing, thank you. And if I was to finish off with some of my own observations, the things that I've learnt from today, if we always talk about housing often from a cost perspective, given the current economic climate. But it sounds as though we need to consider some of the benefit, what are the true costs in that cost-benefit analysis? So it's not just the dollar figure, as we've heard. We need to acknowledge the value that arises from limited transport kilometres, limited disruption to sites, limited waste on site. We need to value quality in terms of perhaps reduced defects, more control, in a factory environment before departing for site. The ability for that closer supervision, and also to value the workforce communities that are created in the process. So it's not only a unique training opportunity, but it's potentially a safer within a factory with a group of people that are familiar and safe, and it obviously offers some very great and diverse training opportunities for a broader range of people. I hope you'll join me in thanking our speakers today. And I'd like to thank you all for attending our concurrent session. Thank you.